the very difficult experience of Syriza, of which, of course, in a sense, you'll all know more than me, and you're closer to than me. Perhaps not in terms of some personal acquaintances, but nevertheless in terms of just proximity. The defeat of Syriza has been something that has been very important for the Spanish left and for Podemos, because of course when things are wrong, the entire mainstream compares Podemos to Syriza and says, you know, look, if you want Podemos, that's what you're going to get. Look at Greece, no? This is the obvious maneuver from the mainstream media. Well, Podemos has debated and has been observing the Syriza experience very, very closely, and is working again to try to lock itself into some sort of stronger stance vis-a-vis Europe. Okay? So what we are moving into is a period of uncertainty, and the defining moment of this period is still ahead of us. It's still 1 month in front of us, and a lot is going to come from the results of the next June 26th election in Spain. But if all prospects are successful, if Podemos is able, Podemos and Popular Unity are able to take over the Socialist Party in terms of a percentage of votes, then a lot of things are going to change very drastically, and they are going to be codified in terms of a new transition, or a revision of the transition, or the full realization of the transition. It's going to reopen up the unspoken parts of the transition process, of the omissions of the transition process, and address them, and try to bring the Spanish political establishment up to speed with the social changes and the political changes that are happening beyond it in society. Critically, nevertheless, and this is where I want to get more back into the question of the state, we have to see what happens. But Podemos has been very forcefully putting forward the idea that any kind of coalition that it takes part in to rule Spain after the next election, whether it is done from the position of most voted party, whether it's done from the position of second most voted party on the left, so whether Podemos is actually the junior partner or the leading partner of this coalition, whatever happens, Podemos has emphasized the need to take over key instances of the Spanish state to make sure that the transformations promised are carried out. Among them, key posts within the security establishment, key posts within the information agencies of the state, so the way in which, in particular, political surveys are conducted, and so on and so forth, and key ministries of the Spanish state. This has naturally led to a big attack on Podemos as, oh, well, I thought you guys were the new politics. If you're the new politics, how come you're so obsessed about getting the seats, these ministries, you know, trying to make a deal about who becomes the next director of the National Center of Intelligence or whatever. You guys are the new politics, how come you're doing that? But of course this is a critical part of Podemos' analysis of what was wrong in transition. What was wrong, one of the things that was wrong in transition politics is that the real access of capital and capitalists to key agencies of the state, either institutionally or through personal access, were left open. So there's been a real element of ravaging the state and the collective economy of Spain in the last few years. And so taking key posts of the Spanish state after an election is an essential demand. Podemos wants to win power. Podemos doesn't want to withdraw, doesn't want to evade, doesn't want to reformulate politics. Podemos quite critically has reformulated electoral messages in order to win elections. Podemos comes from this assembly traditions, horizontal politics. Everyone can vote in primaries in Podemos, even those who are just sympathizers, not members, etc., etc. It has wonderfully combined that, wonderfully, or very unwonderfully. It has very intelligently combined that with a strong set of institutions within the party that make sure that dissent is contained and that make sure that the party has a very, very clear direction, so that there's an extreme level of ambivalence within Podemos as to what it is. But it certainly is not a party. This is just a group that is specializing in winning elections. And its track record is quite spectacular in European elections, in local elections, and at the national level. It's only a couple of times in regional elections in Andalusia where the result was not as great as they anticipated, and then in Catalonia recently, where in regional elections they were squeezed by pro and anti-independentists, and that result suffered, although Podemos is, by all services, the first party in Catalonia in terms of intention of vote, which that is quite relevant. So Podemos is an electoral machine geared to take power, geared to take the state, and to try to take key agencies of the state. From an understanding, and here this is just an exegesis. It's not. This doesn't come from. This doesn't come from the horse's mouth. But I think it just belies a sense that the state retains an ultimate platform in order to combat capital. That the state is, in a sense, if you like, a geopolitical frontier for capital, and that the state staffed and populated by if you like, the right kind of political activists, the right kind of programs, and the right kind of guarantees can contain the dictates of Europe, can contain the dictates of capital, and can do a lot. In the process, in order to take power, in order to win elections so successfully, and so on and so forth, Podemos has had to abandon the most radical bits of a lot of its rhetoric. That's also true. So there's an element of adaptation. But I think that there is clearly a very promising and a very novel process afoot, certainly in Spanish politics, but I would say even at the European level for certain reasons. Two reasons I would say mainly. The Socialist Party in Spain is not PASOK. The Socialist Party is undergoing its own gradual erosion, and it's likely that the Socialist Party will become essentially a party in Andalusia, the main party in Andalusia and in the east, in the rural east of the country, but no longer a national party of opposition or of government. But it has not done so at the same rate as the spectacular speed with which PASOK fell to almost marginality. So that condition is not present in Spanish politics, and that's important. Part of the media outlets, the most important media outlets in Spain, are still wed to the Socialist Party, as use the Socialist Party and centre-left values as mouthpieces for different entrepreneurial interests. The second element I think differentiates Spain from Greece is simply the vulgar question of size. What's at stake for European integration in terms of Podemos accessing power is probably more radical more urgent, more challenging to Europe than the rise of Syriza to power in Greece. Syriza was a signal, but for Podemos to take over power in Spain would be a very, very important challenge for European institutions. And I'm not sure what the response from European institutions on this would be. We'll see also whether Podemos falls under its own process of adaptation to power and ends up being soft on Brussels and Europe. But the relevance of a prospect in which Podemos in some way takes power, takes some key agencies of the Spanish state is I think, quite great. Anyway, I think from what I've been saying, something comes through. which is my own understanding of the state and state theory. It's an undiluted instrumentalist take on the state. The state understood as cadres, institutions, and functions of the state. When there's a regime of accumulation, understood as a set of capitalist interests that are aware of each other, so that have a global vision about different private interests, but unified by a common vision, an accumulation strategy. The state is an essential part of passing that over, but it passes that over in a way that can be mapped. That, I don't want to use this dirty word, of all dirty words, particularly in a critical workshop like this. But it is empirically a traceable phenomenon. You can see these exchanges and these relations happening, and in a sense, I've been trying to suggest to you how that's been happening in Spain. So there is an instrumentalist reading of the state, which is very useful in terms of the strategy pursued by parties that want to make some transformation, not just on local politics and not just on national politics, but on European politics more broadly. So I don't know. I think I'm going to leave it there. But I think there's a lot of elements that I hope we'll discuss from here. I'd love to hear what you think. Thanks.
Dakikamız var araya kadar. Soru sormak isteyen ya da yorumda bulunmak isteyen.
Gonzalo'yla konuşması için çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Gonzalo'yla konuşması için çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Aslında Podemos söz konusu olduğunda ya da Siriza söz konusu olduğunda burada bazı arkadaşlarımız var Halkların Demokratik Partisi'nden. Bu partide kurulduğu zaman geniş bir yelpazede kurulmuştu ve daha önce daha çok Türkiye'nin Kürdistan coğrafyasında örgütlenmiş olan bir partinin Sol İttifak'la birlikte Türkiye coğrafyasının tamamına yayılan bir çıkış arayışı vardı ve o zaman Podemos ve Siriza Türkiye'de çok popüler bir şekilde konuşulmaya başlanmıştı. Hem teorik açıdan hem pratik açıdan konuşuluyordu. Fakat Türkiye'nin kendine özgü bir takım hem coğrafyasından kaynaklanan hem de göçmen politikasından vesaireden kaynaklanan gelişmeler ve ayrıca Kürdistan'ın kendi iç dinamikleri bu projenin biraz sakatlanmasına yol açtı. Bu projeyi, birinci sorum şu, bu projeden haberi var mı ya da bu partiden haberi var mı? Bu sıkışıklıkla ilgili Batı literatüründe bir kaynak var mı? Okuma, tartışma imkanı buldu mu? İkinci soruda belki bu soruyla birlikte düşünülebilecek bir şey. Podemos ve Siriza arasında bir ayrım konuşmasında ifade etti ve Podemos'un aslında Avrupa açısından önemli bir sosyalistler açısından ve genel politikaların yeniden kuşatılması açısından önemli olduğunu söylemişti. Siriza hatalarından arındırarak, daha doğrusu arındırılma ihtimalini göstererek. Acaba HDP projesi içinde yani Türkiye'leşme ve Türkiye'nin ezilen sınıflarının ifadesi olmaya çalışan ama kendi özgür Kürdistan ve Türkiye koşullarının yarattığı bir sıkışıkla Podemos'u ya da Türkiye'nin HDP'sini nasıl değerlendirebilir? Bir takım açılımlar yapabilir. Çok teşekkür ederim. Sağ olun.
Sırayla alıyoruz soruları değil mi? Siz de bir sonraki sefere. Önce cevabı alıp
Shall I take that?
Okay, tamam, bunu da alalım.
Evet, ben öncelikle edemiyorduk yani hem felsefi olması hem de yaşlı olmamız nedeniyle. Bu çevrili olanı takip edemem diye gelmemişti. Ne kaçırdı yani. Harikaydı. Şimdi benim biraz fazla sorum olacak. Arkadaşlara da affına sığınıyorum. Birkaç tane soru soracağım. Birincisi hazır. İspanya'dan liberter, devrimci birini yakalamışken Durutti'yi kim öldürdü? Yani o soruyu soracağım öncelikle. Onu unuturum diye en başta sorayım. Yani komünter ajanları diye dedikodu da var. İspanya'nın liberter, özgürlükçü, devrimci seni kim öldürdü? Birinci soru bu. İkincisi işte Podemos odaklı. Aslında İspanya, bizim durduğumuz yerden İspanya bir başarı öyküsü. Türkiye'deki Sinan Odabaş için İspanya bir başarı öyküsü. Yani 1930'ları hatırla. Bugün hatta Avrupa Birliği'nin ilk genişleme kremasından en çok faydalanan ülkelerden biri de diyebiliriz. Ama geldiği yer bir başarı öyküsü gibi gözüküyor bize. Yani bu konuda ne düşünür? Yani bizim gibi ülkelerdeki insanlar böyle görüyoruz biz. Bir başarı öyküsü. Esas sorum Podemos. Şimdi Podemos sokaktan gelen, yapabiliriz diyen, aşağıdan yukarıya örgütlenip aslında siyaseti doğru tanımlayan, çözmeyip ağır bedeller ödediğimiz sorunları çözmek, halkın iradesi, pratik, yerinde, hayatı yaşayan halkın iradesi belirleyiciliğiyle gelecek beklentisini yönetmek. Siyaseti böyle algılayan organizasyonlar aşağıdan yukarıya örgütlenir. Siyaset yerel bir aktivitedir. Günümüzde merkezi bir aktivite olarak önümüze çıkıyor ama bunu tersine çeviren organizasyonlardan biri başarılı olmaması mümkün değil. Biz başından beri takip ediyoruz. Ben HDP aktivistiyim, genel kurul delegesiyim. Şimdi başarılı olmaması mümkün değil. Ta başından beri Podemos geliyor diye Günziler'in sitesinde anarşist bir arkadaşın bunun tartışmalarını yaptık biz. Bu önümüzdeki süreçte de eminim başarılı olacaktır. Ama asıl soru şu, yani iktidar olmak, iktidar, güç, hegemonya, yani bu liberter gelenek, Durutti'den başlayarak aslında çok daha eski, ne Tanrı ne Efendi'den beri başlayan gelenek, bütün iktidarları dağıtma, hegemonya gücü dağıtmaya odaklı bir gelenek. İktidar olmak, gücü kullanmak, bununla yukarıdan aşağı, bir zaman yine Kamplas buradaki şeyde Sungur Sarvan savunmuştu, Marx'a da haksızlık yapmıştı. İktidar eliyle yukarıdan aşağıya, devlet iktidar eliyle yeni bir üretim ilişkisi inşa edilebilir demişti. Marksizm de tam da budur demiş. Böyle bir şey olamaz. Marx böyle bir şey dememiştir hiçbir zaman. Devlet iktidar eliyle bu ceberut kapitalist sistemin alternatifi başka bir üretim ilişkisi ki ben şimdi kodluyorum, toplumsal ekolojik komünalizm. Yukarıdan aşağıya iktidar ve devlet eliyle inşa edilemez. Şimdi bunu kolaylaştırmak için yerinde doğrudan otonom, demokratik işleyişlere fırsat veren bir iktidarı yerelleştiren, dağıtan, yani bizzat bireylere, insanlara veren bir programa ihtiyacı olacaktır diye düşünüyorum. Şimdi biz buradan, Gonzalez'e asıl sorum, biz buradan İspanya'da okuduğumuz, duyduğumuz, bildiğimiz otonom kentler, bunlar yani bizi heyecanlandırıyor. Şimdi bunlar İspanya'da diğer kentleri heyecanlandırmıyor. Bunların bileşkesinden başka bir hayat, başka başka bir üretim ilişkisinin yeni nüveleri ki ben inanmıyorum yani devlet iktidar ele geçirir, halk ayaklanacak, devrim olacak, yeni bir üretim ilişkisi doğacak, doğmaz. Yani bütün bunların içinde yeni giderek başkalaşan kapitalist üretim ilişkisinin başlangıçta izlerini taşıyan, giderek başkalaşan başka bir üretim ilişkisi inşası. Bu mümkün müdür? Teşekkür ederim.
There was obviously a lot in the second question. On who killed Durruti, I think we could talk afterwards. I might have some information that we could say. What I think is interesting, though, and your question about Durruti, but also the tradition of Spanish anarchism and its role in Podemos, is in general that you find every now and then people that come from the embers of the old CNT, of the great two old anarchist centrals in Spain. They're very, very marginal, and I very much doubt that the grassroots of Podemos have much notion of traditions of anarchism. These were extremely important in the 20s and 30s. There was a very short moment in the 70s when they came back, but I don't think they galvanized much of the political responses articulated by Podemos. But I mean, in a sense, what Podemos is trying to do is, of course, get rid of binaries of left and right, or even autonomism versus anything, some kind of central political response, and just appealing to a broader collective subject, inviting that subject not to define itself as, one or the other, left or right, communist or socialist or anarchist, and so on and so forth. One of the other important things to note is that Podemos is naturally the first party in terms of young voters whose political memory and horizon is after Franco's death. So I think there's a limited amount of autonomism. Autonomism is present, and autonomism is in a sense also still part of the 15th of May Indignados platform. But Podemos is not that, and is not in that tradition. And a lot of people in Podemos actually are much closer, or traditionally closer, to the United Left and the Spanish Communist Party. And in a sense, part of this responds to a sense of the United Left and the Communist Party in Spain for years and years were happy losing elections and getting just 10% of the vote, 8% of the vote, and doing nothing about it. And so you kind of a despair against these groups, trying to formulate an electorally more appealing response. But I don't detect that autonomists are very keen or very present in Podemos, and in fact, a lot of activists associated around platforms of the Indignados and the 15th of May wrote a very interesting book, perhaps the first serious analysis, critical analysis of Podemos. It's a book called Goodbye Pablo. It's a good, it's a book essentially saying Podemos was interesting, but thanks to Pablo and his group of comrades, he's taking this in the direction of the old style, centralized political parties, divorced from social movements and so on. You pointed something quite important as well. The grassroots element in Podemos, the bottom-up element in Podemos. This is ambiguous in Podemos. I don't think Podemos is necessarily a kind of bottom-up party any more than some other parties that are competing for elections. Podemos has inaugurated a number of things, and all parties now are beginning to do them. Open primaries, where everyone can vote. Not everyone did that until Podemos started. Consulting the basis of your party if you're going to enter a deal with someone else, and setting up this massive online consultation. they do give power to people in the sense that the ambiguity is that most Podemos activists and most members of Podemos, the militancy is an online militancy in many cases. In many, participation is a very testimonial participation. And you see this very clearly when things are not great and Podemos isn't able to present this message of let's do it, we're going to do it, you know, this illusion, this positive, suddenly electoral support for Podemos on the polls wanes. So when Podemos goes to the election and it's able to present itself as something new and promising, its support electorally you know, becomes bloated again. And it's been quite successful, but it's a contradiction because the moment that Podemos loses this veneer of positive message, hope and transformation, suddenly those grassroots abandon it. Or, you know, it has a very mobile support. And Podemos always has to be very careful of not disillusioning. I wouldn't say it's a straight bottom-up relationship where the militants suddenly, you know, kind of in an assembly and so on. The leadership of Podemos is quite centralized. There's a citizens' council around the General Secretary of Podemos, Pablo Iglesias, that has concentrated an enormous amount of decision-making power and exercised it to the chagrin of a lot of the more, if you like, autonomist elements of Podemos, although I wouldn't call them autonomous. People who thought that this was better when it was more open. You know? So Pablo Iglesias has imprinted a slightly centralized party model. But I mean, you're right that in comparison to the conservatives in Spain, in comparison to the other parties that are fighting elections, Podemos is the most open in this sense to grassroots development. And if I can just get to the other questions, I think there's a big difference between the Podemos phenomenon and Syriza, but more specifically to the Turkish case. It's not all the big differences between Turkish politics and Spanish politics in general, or even Greek politics for that matter. The problem about Podemos is that it became obvious to everyone that here was a critical mass on the streets, thousands and thousands and thousands of people who were saying that they didn't like anyone on the political spectrum. And then Podemos tried to harness that. This isn't the case with the other experiences. All these other groups in Turkey and Greece don't come from an attempt to give a voice, to give an electoral option to the indignados. I think that's massively important in terms of finding a difference. But of course, in a broader sense, Spanish politics, like Greek politics, is decided in the context of the European Union and of the single currency and of the economic relations that this establishes on it. So the challenges in Turkey and in Europe are extremely different in that sense. But for countries of the European periphery, it's much easier to associate the worst effects of the crisis with European integration. So that's also another card that these parties don't, that the HPP in Turkey doesn't have. So I mean, of course, I have hope and solidarity, but I don't think it's exactly the same phenomenon. The differences are quite big. The political system is very different, but also the fact is that there isn't Podemos emerges out of a regime crisis, and this shapes the whole project, gives it its meaning and its aims. I think that's the differences are too wide. But perhaps there's something to learn from the way in which it's tried to deny political confrontation in terms of the language spoken by the state. It is skewed the terms employed by the state. It is skewed the polemics formulated by the state. And it's put on its own vocabulary and very, very cleverly made it made it a mainstream mediatic phenomenon. And finally, one thing. I'm not sure the Podemos phenomenon could have been possible before the mid-2000s. Podemos, after the Indignados, is, as I say, picking up the banner of, not representing the Indignados, but picking up their banner, saying there is a political choice if you're an Indignado, vote for us. However, Podemos, and they recognize this, they would be the first to admit this, has had, for the first time ever in democratic Spanish politics, the full support of some media outlets, private media outlets, which have given Pablo Iglesias and other members of Aragon a great platform, and they've been great at exploiting it. But I mean, I think that's something that needs to be said. They've been also swimming in a less unfavorable mediatic atmosphere than would have been normally the case. So they've had some media support, and this is also quite good because the Communist Party and the United Left never had that sort of support, and to their chagrin, the Communist Party and the United Left never used the media so cleverly. But there was a media there to be used by Podemos, which they did, and this is part of the success as well. Media benefit from Podemos being on TV, of course. I mean, and these TVs and so on. Their ratings go up with certain political discussions and so on. So everybody's a winner in that sense.
Şu tarafta bir soru var. Orada kamera.
Gonzalo, thanks so much for, I think you gave us a really interesting genealogy of the origins of Podemos, and in particular social and historical conditions that helped its emergence. And I also have to thank you specifically for this almost, again, cold shower description of Podemos as a machine, an electoral machine. And I think you spoke to several difficult transitions. The first transition is the historical transitions from the Franco to post-Franco, and the post-Franco heritage headache, rather, and how various political parties after that had to bear that. And then, all of a sudden, the second transition was the one from the Indignados as politics of presence, which didn't claim anything, and that was the extraordinary thing of those mobilizations at the time. There was just politics of, I am here, listen to me, and that happened in other countries as well. And it was this extraordinary, seemingly unharnessable force. And then Podemos managed, they made harness it. But that is still a transition. And I think that transition is perhaps the hardest. How do we go from a politics of presence to party politics? And party politics necessarily have to engage with history and with future. So it seems to me that the question is whether you think that this electoral machine is the only way, the right way, a good way to go about this thing, whether there are other ways, because what you gave us is a non-idealistic description of the phenomenon. And in many circles there's a lot of idealistic description of how we need to move away from party politics and all that stuff, rather than go deeper into party politics in order for something to change, to emerge. So, and this is instinctively difficult, because what you think, what the first instinct is, I want to move away from that, this is all corrupt. Yet, they're doing it in a... And the third thing, a point that I wanted to make about the connection between Syriza and Podemos, is that Syriza, first of all, has been demonized by the media throughout. So it never had any media support. And that's quite extraordinary, the fact that they managed to do what they managed to do. And then there's a third transition, from party politics to government. And that is a transition that if that is a space of hope, then it remains to be seen. But that is perhaps the hardest transition. And I think lots of things have changed. Obviously, that lots of things change. And one thing I've noticed is that Syriza's one of I think the basic problems in Syriza is the gender representation. So women in Syriza were simply not represented. The government was just men. Gender representation was abysmal. So they learned and tried to avoid that in a country which is as macho and gender specific as Greece. And they said in the primary elections, if I remember correctly, 50% of men, 50% of women. But it didn't work. Because the majority of people wanted to, I mean, the actual vote, it seemed to me, or how I read it at the time, was that it's still just, men were coming through. So what I'm trying to understand is harnessing, again, this kind of gender politics, especially when you move into a government position.
Başka sorusu olan var mı?
Başka soru var mı? Sen, pardon, o zaman. Pardon, evet.
Öncelikle hoş geldiniz. Dün bizim burada devlet atölyemiz vardı. Devlet atölyemizde çok temel bir soru soruldu. İspanya Savaşı'nda çalışan arkadaşlarımız vardı. İspanya monarşi mi, cumhuriyet mi? Şimdi buna verilecek cevaba göre aslında bir politik hat da oluşturup oluşturamamak birazcık belirginleşecek. Eğer bir monarşi ise Podemos veya benzeri bir hareket, mesela bu monarşiyi yıkacak, bunu en azından tarihsel veya toplumsal köklerini, o stabilizasyonunu bozacak bir hamle yapabilecek mi? Bence önemli bir konu. Yani bir nevi aslında monarşi devam ederken Podemos iktidara gelirse kapitalizm içinde bir adam olacak. Eğer adaysa bunun başka adalarla irtibatlanması nasıl olacak? Birincisi bu. İkinci bir soru da şöyle bir şey. Bu Franco rejimi, aslında onlara falanjistler diyebilir miyiz bilmiyorum. Falanjistlerin mirasını Franco sonrası döneme de devrettiğinden bahsetseniz. Özellikle mesela parti semptomları bağlamında. Eğer öyle bir şey varsa, Franco 1975'te öldü. Geçiş dönemi bundan sonra başlamışsa, 1975'lerden itibaren neoliberal devletçiliğin daha doğrusu, devlet modelinin de yerleşmeye başladığı bir dönem. Eğer öyle düşünürsek, buradaki rejim sorunu mu, devlet biçiminin dönüşümü sorunu mu? Şundan dolayı, ben bu noktada Polanzatçı bir yerden bakmayı tercih ediyorum. Çünkü 75'ten sonraki devlet biçimleri sadece tek bir noktada değil, Avrupa'da ve Türkiye'de dahil olmak üzere Thatcherizm, Reaganizm, Türkiye'de özanizm olarak tarif edilmişti. Yürütmenin güçlendirilmesi, işçi hareketlerine karşı aşırı bir baskı pratiklerinin devreye girmesi, iktidar şebekelerinin oluşturması gibi, yani iktidar şebekesinden kastım, tırnak içinde sivil örgütlerin ama iktidarla bağlantılı sivil örgütlerin kurulması. Bunlar daha çok böyle kontrük gerilla tarzı örgütler. Yani pek çok, sadece tek bir ülke değil, pek çok ülkede görülen eş zamanlı özellikler. Yani belki buradan mı bakabiliriz? Franco sonrası döneme. Teşekkür ederim.
Merhaba, hoş geldiniz. Ben Podemos'un Türkiye'yi ve Avrupa'yı da içine alan mülteci krizine bakış açısını öğrenmek istiyorum. Bu konuda ne düşünüyorlar, nasıl bakıyorlar, bu konudaki algıları nedir? Teşekkür ederim.
Bu Avrupa'da Syriza, Podemos'un bir kez daha ortaya çıkması. Bunların, ben şöyle okuyorum, tarih içerisine baktığımız zaman, 2000'lerden itibaren bir tür parti dışı politika. Özellikle halk deneyimi üzerinden daha ziyade siyasi öznenin partiler olmadığı bir politikaya, çokluk olduğu bir politikaya, en azından geleneksel biçimde temsil edilmediği bir politikaya vurgu yapılıyordu. Ve bunlar gerçekten de çok önemli hareketler ortaya çıkarttılar. İspanya'da Indignados, işte Porto Alegre, Gezi, Türkiye'de ve hepsi de Indignados'a benzer tepkiler gösterdiler. Mevcut politikalardan memnun değiliz, mevcut partilerden memnun değiliz. Ama bu yatay politika yapma biçimi görünüşe göre bir şeyleri fazla değiştiremedi. Önemli bir enerji ortaya çıkardı ama çok şeyi değiştiremedi. Ve bir kez daha partiler ortaya çıktı. Bunlar Leninist partilerden farklıydı ama istisnasız olarak hepsinde de eski Leninistler yer alıyordu. Acaba bir post-Leninizm mi yaşıyoruz? soru bu. Yani bu ortaya çıkanlar ve yani solun ruhu bir tür post-Leninist ruh mu artık? Ve bu ruh bize cevap verebilecek mi? Zira 20 yıl öncesinden ortaya çıkmaya başladı bunlar esasında. Özellikle Latin Amerika'da. Venezuela deneyimi, başka yerlerdeki deneyimler. Hatta Fidel Castro dedi ki gerilla dönemi bitmiştir. Artık böyle başarıya ulaşmamız gerekiyor dendi. Fakat bir yandan da Latin Amerika'da düşüşe geçti. Yani post-feministler daha kendileri de çok önemli değişiklikler yapamadan bir kez daha iktidardan düşmeye başladılar. Büyük ihtimalle Syriza ve Podemos'un da siz galiba öyle anladım ben. 2000'lerin ortasını bulamayacak gibi bir tahmin vardı. Ben de bu tahmine katılıyorum. Bir kez daha sanki ben başarıya değil de başarısızlığa mahkummuş gibi görüyorum bu hareketleri. Siz ne düşünüyorsunuz? Önümüzdeki dönemin ruhu bir kez daha devrimciliğin geri dönüşümü olacak? Çokluk politikasının mı geri dönüşü olacak? Yoksa ne bekliyoruz?
Başka sorusu olan var mı? Oraya.
Benim sorum aslında Kansu'ya Barış sorduğu için ben zamana karşı da bir sıkıntımız olduğu için sorumu erteliyorum. Çok teşekkür ederim. Sağ olun.
Başka soru yoksa ben bir soru sorabilir miyim? From what I understand in your presentation is that the way the actors, the political, Podemos in that case, perceives and analyzes the state has a direct impact on the strategy that they devise. So how we perceive the state actually, how we theorize the state has an empirical effect on the way the politics is shaped. This is what I got from your presentation, as in the case of this instrumentalist reading of the state. And I found it interesting because the usual instrumentalist theories of the state makes us feel as if the state is controlled by capital groups, thus it is actually almost impossible for the working class actors to do something about it. But in that reading, in that instrumentalist reading, it means that if some agencies are controlled by some groups, such as capital, the working class or their representatives can also have some control over those agencies. So this kind of inversion. So does your argument imply that theoretically? And the second question is much shorter. We have been working on the state theory for a long time, as far as I know. And we also did some empirical and historical studies about the Russian state, apart from Spain. The Marxists, we usually like using our theoretical concepts to understand the empirical context. But when you look at the empirical context, is there a way in which all those facts speak back to your concepts and help you to revisit them, invalidate them, rejuvenate them? In what ways your historical and empirical inquiry helped you, if it did, to revisit those more traditional theoretical concepts within Marxism about the state? Perhaps one or two examples, if you could give some.
Okay, 10 minutes to 12 minutes. Oh, well, that makes all the difference. No, thank you. Okay, I'm going to try to take them in the best order I could put them in, and I'd be grateful if anybody stops me and says, "What about my question? You didn't mention that." So please do feel free to pull the brakes and interrupt if your point hasn't been addressed fully. Now, first of all, the question of refugees. Podemos is in the middle of an electoral process, and it's a vital electoral contest. It cannot do worse than it did in the elections in December, and it has the challenge of having to do at least better, or trying to do better than the Socialist Party in terms of votes. Because only from then can it feel that, that it's been justified in its methods, its success will justify the methods. This means that Podemos' critique of European institutions in the refugee crisis is a relatively unpolemical one, in the sense that Podemos can confine its criticisms to the absolute disaster that European policy is on this score. Podemos has a number of Eurodeputies which are very vocal about this and very active in terms of the refugee crisis. And Podemos can also say, look at how absolutely pointless all this setup is and how hypocritical it is. Spain, in the course of I don't know how many European summits, committed itself to receiving, I think it was, I don't know, something like 1,000 refugees. That's nothing for Spain. And I think to date only 18 have arrived and so on. And it can concentrate its critiques on the obvious part of the refugee crisis. And beyond that, point out that the refugee crisis is in some obvious ways also the direct result of certain politics, foreign politics, followed by the West in the Middle East. So the collapse of stable state regimes in the Middle East, the ensuing civil strife in Syria, and so on. But it essentially has that line. But I have to say, this is one of the least complicated points of Podemos' electoral strategy or political message, because not many people can stand in front of a TV interviewer today or make an interview in a newspaper. Not many people in government, in politics, or in general, in Spain, at least this is the context of Spain, thankfully, and say that the refugee crisis is being handled successfully. In Spain, the wide consensus is that this is an unmitigated disaster, a humanitarian disaster, and so on and so forth. And it's the government that has to defend its very, very poor record on this, both in terms of negotiating with Europe and doing anything about the refugees, and of course the Conservatives having followed US foreign policy during the Aznar years so blindly. But the center-left in Spain doesn't really have a problem here. It's not a polemical element of the program. The socialists, of course, say one thing and do another when they are in the institutions and European institutions and so on. But there's a relatively easy consensus to come by on this question. But I think Podemos has a fairly reasonable line, which is that this is a humanitarian disaster, and that it's just unmasking the failure of Europe as a normative project and as a political project. So many summits, and we can't really organize the reception of a minimal number of refugees in Spain. Yeah. I hope that sort of answers your question. I suspect there might be more to it, but if not, I'll just push on. There's a great question from Andreas on something that makes, in a sense, my presentation much clearer, which is the three transitions way of looking at it. First transition, the actual passage to democratic politics, a transition from the indignados in 2011 to something like a political party or electoral machine, and then a third transition still ahead of us, which is a takeover of power, and how the difficulties that these present. This question sort of appeals to other questions that have been made about regimes, about states, and about power. And first of all, to call Podemos an electoral machine is in a sense a statement of fact. This is a group of friends who have been extremely successful at setting up some kind of political avenue for discussion, for the formulation of programs, for setting up electoral campaigns, and then winning winning a lot of electoral support in record time. Are they a party? In some senses, they structure as a party. In some senses, no. Is this a contradiction or a difficulty? Less than one might think. I mentioned this book, Goodbye Pablo, done from the most autonomist, if you like, camp of the indignados. People are not there anymore, but of course the organizations and the committees they set up still meet, and they still deliberate, and they still formulate responses and so on. They're very vocal against Podemos and the kind of charismatic turn it's taken, the more centralized turn it's taken. But Podemos doesn't present itself as the party of the indignados in the sense that, in the sense of being the political expression of that moment. That's not Podemos, and Podemos has never had this this ambition. Podemos has the ambition of winning elections to make things better, at least to ameliorate the worst aspects of Spanish politics. Because you see, it's not possible that the political landscape in Spain was getting so dry, so lacking in efficiency, so lacking in ideas, so lacking in responses, the crisis hitting so hard, corruption scandals all over the place, and it's just unbelievable that the Conservatives continue to win. Even now, in the next election, they have an electoral floor of 27%. So whatever happens, the Conservatives get a very big percentage of the vote, and the response of Podemos is, we can't let this happen. Something has to be done. It doesn't involve a revolutionary transformation the day after they take power, and it doesn't involve, if you like, the inauguration of a new lawscape. No, not at all, not at all. This is a very, in a sense, humble proposal. If you're fed up, you can vote for us. If you want to see the end to austerity, or at least a plausible challenge to austerity, vote for us, because you won't get it from the parties that are there. But we're not representing the indignados as such. So that transition is not so problematic. And then there's a third transition to taking power, and that is, of course, famously a historical big uncertainty. Weird things happen to people when they begin dealing and wheeling, and we can have some hope. This is the big test for the grassroots nature that Podemos claims to have. If Podemos is really a party that gives a voice to its bases, to its grassroots, and to sympathizers, and really wants to democratize politics and inaugurate a dialogue between politicians, parties, the state, and the voters, and us, we will see. The test is when they take power and whether they respond and what they do and how they explain what they've done and whether they put their money where their mouth is when it comes to it. And I don't predict the future any more than anyone else, although I have hope that they'll do a bit better. I don't know. There's not much else to go around, and this is not, this is the thing. Podemos has the big merit of having changed the ways of parliamentary politics, has changed the landscape of Spanish politics, and there's nothing quite like it else. We know where we're coming from, and this was, in a sense, a big novelty, a very refreshing thing. So let's not abandon it quite yet. Let's see what they do with their power. But of course, these are three key moments. Now, one of the questions from the translation booth is regarding the post-Leninist or Leninist character. I mean, I think I mentioned this, Podemos springs from a group of friends, a handful of people, very much centered around one university in Madrid and so on. And in a sense, activists know each other and so on. And I guess a lot of people in the Citizens Council and around Pablo Iglesias, and I think Pablo Iglesias himself come from a Spanish tradition that is, in a sense, very attracted by autonomism, and with a lot to learn from autonomism and from other forms of post-Marxism. But in Pablo Iglesias' case specifically, also very much with the memory of the Communist Party and the Communist youth, where he was a militant, and the value of Leninism. I don't know whether we're going to see a post-Leninist face or not. In some senses, I would hope not. I wonder sometimes whether withdrawals, the renunciation of power because it's so bloody dirty, etc., in a sense, isn't like a godsend to the elites and the bastards that rule us. I mean, when we say we're withdrawing, I'm sure they love it. They love it. Yeah, go ahead, withdraw, but don't come anywhere near here. Don't give me trouble when I have to make a decision. Don't give me, don't give me any guff if I have to, you know, corruptly give this part of the land or, you know, surreptitiously reform the constitution to introduce more flexibility, etc., etc. So Podemos in this sense is a very traditional animal. It wants to take power and move levers, take decisions, which not everybody are going to like, not in Podemos, not outside Podemos, but decisions that come from a sense that certain things are so wrong that they need to be changed, and that you can't change them from outside the institutions. So I think that's such an essential point to play. And yes, you're right that autonomism was very, very big, has been very prominent, but it's also, I mean, there are no transformationist traditions around with an enormous track record of success. No, not the autonomists, not the... So what are we going to end up arguing about? Who is less or more pure? Who is less or more democratic? Who has less or more Stalinist takes? Well, at least here we have a situation in which we can discuss what is being done tomorrow at the Council of Ministers. You know, and so I think that's in a sense valuable. Thank you. Somebody mentioned an essential point here about monarchy versus republic, and the Poulantzier's notion of regime. I think that's a really important point. Of course, King Juan Carlos was the designated head of state by Franco. It was Franco's choice that the king was going to stay king of a democratic state. Without that, the Spanish army and the Spanish dictatorial establishment would have never accepted the legalization of the Communist Party and other things. So a condition to bringing about democratic reforms was, okay, we go back to a monarchy. We're never going to have a republic now. Now, as you know, the first democratic king in Spain abdicated a year ago, a year and a half, or 2 years ago almost now. He and his family are enveloped in corruption scandals too. So the profile of the king and the royal family as somehow nice things about the post-Francoist regime is wearing off, has worn off a lot. And of course, a lot of young people, 60% of the Spanish electoral census now was born after the transition, so they don't recall what it meant to be under Franco. They don't have to, and the value of the monarchy is different for them. So, it's the monarchy doesn't have the same value as it did. I don't think that, and this is Podemos' line anyway. Nevertheless, there should be, there should be a big change in terms of monarchy to republic. The popular unity wing is in favor of a republic, has always been. Podemos has always said that monarchy versus republic is not really the issue. That of course it would be better to vote for the head of state, but that the problem here is a little bit more immediate, urgent, concerning austerity and so on. This is in a sense also an indication of how elections are won. You have to give up a lot of symbolic, important parts of the program and focus on things that more or less everyone can be aware, can support. And finally, I want to say something about Bennett's question on instrumentalism. I'm not sure I've addressed in full the Poulantzien point made earlier, but I would like to, so we can come back to that in a second. But I want to say this about instrumentalism more broadly. First of all, one of the things I've learned by looking at different cases is that there are elements that are generalizable in Marxist state theory, which is an extremely, I think, positive thing to find out. It means that work on the theory of the state, however much historicized, however much applied to very specific conditions, has value and strategic value across different experiences. I didn't think that a few years ago, and now I do. So this is one of the things that has changed in my looking at instrumentalism. And instrumentalism has a naive leg, a naive part, and it has a less naive aspect to it. The naive instrumentalism is simply the idea that the state is like the cockpit of an airplane, and where the airplane goes depends on who's sitting at the seat, right? And I call this naive because, of course, it's naive that to believe that, like American pluralists and so on, like many other sociological traditions might think, it's so naive to think that a trade unionist, a new party, etc., has the same access and the same real chances of making it into the cockpit of the airplane. I think that, you know, instrumentalism needs to deal with the fact that the abilities to take over the state are extremely skewed in favor of the elite, in favor of capital. But nevertheless, it has an enormous advantage. I've mentioned the empirical bit, which as I get older, perhaps a sign of age, I like more and more. And there's also the sense that in the end what you're dealing with is power, but class power. This is what sets Marx's instrumentalism apart from any other form of pluralism or instrumentalism in understanding the state. So that combination of generalizability, class interests, as opposed to just multiple interests, class interests, agency, and an approach that is empirically possible, but also generalizable and politically relevant. I think that's what I think is convincing me more and more. And of course, perhaps it should always, this is a good caveat, that naturally instrumentalism is not, it's a false binary between instrumentalism and structuralism and so on and so forth, but there's still different positions.
Gonzo'ya ve çevirmenlerimize çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Bir anons yapmak istiyorum. Taner Yelkenci'nin ailesi bizimle birlikte paylaşmak için su böreği ve getirmiş. Çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Hep beraber çay içerek beklemek üzere dışarıya davet ediyoruz.